feel is the best of the Team Fortress 2 Workshop this year's Stream Fortress update, so you guys can know exactly what is on there and what I feel should definitely be put in the game. Here we go. Now to get things started, unfortunately, it seems like not a lot of people have faith in Valve putting weapons up for Team Fortress 2 Scream Fortress, as the majority of community-made updates only really seem to get reskins to find. But there are a couple of very nice-looking weapons currently on the Steam Workshop for Scream Fortress. My favorite being the Book Halloween Punch. Now this obviously is just a Void Atomic Punch reskin, but with a very nice Halloween theme. The model and texture looks really good, and to be honest, I would always use this year-round. I would want this to have no Halloween restriction because I just think it looks really good. The only other weapon I think looks great on the Steam Workshop is the Slasher's Staple, which is just a giant kitchen knife covered in blood that the creator seems to want to replace your Eternal Reward with. Now, even though there are very few weapons that seem to be submitted to the workshop anymore because Valve just doesn't seem to care about them, there is definitely a large amount of very excellent cosmetics. And we're just going to go through them very quickly. The Computron 5000 seems to be an all-class robot head, and if added into the game, I would love for Valve to enable all the MVM voice lines for all of the mercs. Now, even though Valve has stated that the majority of the items they're looking at this year, they really don't want to put a Halloween restriction on, that does not mean I'm very much looking for items that fit the Halloween theme perfectly. And in my opinion, one of those items is the Clown Gore Madness. This mask is insane. I really love the look of it, and I love how it has a tiny hat that kind of looks like a gibbous on it. This is a very creepy looking cosmetic, and I feel like there are not enough of the very scary and creepy looking cosmetics. Instead, there's just a ton of the crazy ones, like the ostrich legs. I would rather see a scary item versus the crazy item. That does not mean that we're not going to be doing crazy items, as one of my other favorite items is the ingrown dough nail, which appears to be a soldier hat that changes your merc's head to a toe. It's a toe. Look at it. You can paint the toenail. This is genius. Next on the list is the lightning lid. Now, we do have many Bong Boy style cosmetics, but this one kind of goes for that Turbo Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger look, kind of. I just really like the way this one looks, and the paint overs look pretty nice on it as well. We also have one that I've been eyeing up for a while, and that's called the Master Builder, which is very simplistic, but the idea is amazing. It's just an engineer miscellaneous that makes the top of his head looks like one of those building blocks from one of many different companies. Also, another item that I absolutely love the look of is the Engineer's Dead or Alive. It turns the entire back half of your Engie's head into some kind of weird-looking machine with lights and what looks to be some kind of flap. It's a really cool-looking cosmetic. Also staying with the theme of just creepy-looking cosmetics for Halloween is the Comedian. Now, I've been a fan of this one for over a year now, and I was incredibly disappointed when it was not added in last year. Just take a look at it. I really don't need to explain this one. It's perfect. The heavy has a creepy-ass clown, and goes right on with it. And the last very creepy one tops the charts on creepiness, and I want it in the game now. It's a pyro cosmetic called the Doll Face, and this is what it looks like. And most importantly, my all-time favorite item seen within the Team Fortress 2 Workshop right now is the Specialist, which appears to change your medic into a Black Mesa scientist, but not any kind of Black Mesa scientist. It appears to be going off of the leaked Half-Life 1 Alpha Black Mesa scientist, and it looks perfect. I want this in the game now. This is an amazing cosmetic that does not need to be Halloween restricted. It's just, oh, it's so good. Finally, and most importantly, there are two items added within the Steam Workshop that kind of are based off of this channel. One of them is called the Tie-In, and the other one is called the McSlicker. The McSlicker and the Tie-In are vaguely based off of two things: the movie Anchorman with Will Ferrell and this channel, which is incredible that this exists on the Workshop. It's a head cosmetic that gives it a very Anchorman newscaster-style hairdo, along with the Tie-In, which is obviously a sweater vest with a tie and a button shirt. It's a very classy miscellaneous. However, it's not necessarily uploaded for Halloween, just in general. I really like how this one turned out, and if you want to have a Valve News Network cosmetic added within the game, go vote for it. Link is down in the description for all of the cosmetic items that I've talked about today. If you like any of them, please vote for them, as Valve will be able to more likely see them the more all be behind two paywalls, and hopefully if we're able to get any of the reskins, they won't just be for the scouts. So thank you for watching, guys. If you like this video, like it. If you dislike it, feel free to dislike it. If you have any other complaints or compliments for me, leave them down in the description below. And if you want to support this channel, I have a Patreon page, which is also listed in the description below. Once again, if you want to vote on any of these items, all of these items are listed down in the description. And thank you for watching. As you know, I'm Tyler McVicker. This is Pvz Network. Have a good day. Adios.
Trying to tell you guys about this wonderful new little program called Discord that only a few people truly know about. It's a free chat room program that lets you talk to your friends. The link below. And the channel at discord.gg/array7. Hop in the discussions. Swing by the chat rooms where I usually hang out and submit fan art for the end title cards. Alright, that's done. Let's get the show on the road. And at long last, after over 400 days of waiting, when almost seemed to be lost, the Pyro update has arrived in the form of a jungle. And needless to say, it is quite a pack of content. We got everything from maps, contracts, weapons, rebalances, now even a short. And while I really enjoyed the update, with the new things to play with, it is not without the traditional balance hiccups, for lack of a better term. So what exactly is new? Well, before the title card cuts me off, I'd like to mention that what Valve did differently this time is that we got delivered. We got 6 new maps added to the general pool for matchmaking. Well, new is a relative term. I've been playing on and hating the guts out of Brazil for years, and I know that some of these other maps are old news as well. The problem here is the maps are a total mess. Mercenary Park is a stew of confused players, random crits, and 90% choke points that make rounds either last forever or end immediately. Enclosure makes me feel incredibly claustrophobic, and I guess that was the intent, but I mean, even so, for a payload map, it plays a little bit too hectic for me. Especially as the medic main, I'm always in the crossfire, okay? If anything, if a random crit comes within 10 meters of me, I'm gonna get ended, I guarantee it. I'm more of a fan of the big open spaces like Upward and Badwater. That's just me. Boss Rock is the one that I've actually enjoyed the most, mainly because I really like attack defend in general. It's a very differently designed map, and it's not easy to make a list like that, so I can respect the new design. But still, even though I enjoy it, it's not exactly optimal. There's no space in it whatsoever. I think it's just become running theme for all these maps. There's no space in them. They're just tightly compact. That's all they are. Banana Bay is a total clusterfuck. I'd like to actually congratulate this map for confirming my suspicions that Payload Race officially spawns the worst maps possible. Arguably worse than Arena. The whole thing is Swiss cheese. There's bridges, holes, stairs, rails everywhere. There's no real way to tell where you are. It might as well be called Spaghetti Bay, because that's basically what it is. I enjoy Lazarus. I mean, not enough to play Lazarus. As far as King of the Hill maps go, this one might be on par with Harvest. Kind of a place where you don't take anything seriously, and you just shitball for 10 minutes, and there's no problem with that whatsoever. And of course, bringing up the rear is Brazil. For those of you who play competitive TF2, you might recognize it. It's made a couple rounds in the rotation, and while a lot of people aren't huge fans of it, it certainly plays way better than the rest. Now, of course, it's not quite designed for 24 to 32 people, but I mean, it's a start. It plays okay. That's fun. Now, while these maps certainly aren't much to write home about gameplay-wise, they do wonders for TF2's aesthetics. The game has suffered from this nasty, dusty orange and fake blue color scheme for ages, and seeing really bright colors of tropic water and jungles and lush landscapes, it's such a nice break from the regular dusty, dirty, look. I hope this level of detail becomes more commonplace in some of the newer maps built for casual. I would recommend this level of detail for a competitive map for, obvious reasons, but having a good looking environment to play in for the layman can definitely make a huge difference. Like me, I like playing on pretty maps, so it seems to me that developers of all these maps put a little bit more time in fashion than function, which I myself have been guilty of. But the problem is that after all that time and effort put into decoration, aesthetics, putting all the design elements into it, and all the detail, like making Mercenary Park actually look like a Chinese Jurassic Park knockoff, it's all going to go to waste when the initial attraction wears off, and nobody wants to play it because the map it's a mess. It's a tragedy. Same with the other three, and Brazil, while not being one of the prettiest maps, at least plays fine. I feel like the maps they added already have a shelf life of maybe 2 or 3 months maximum or so before people stop playing them and go back to the typical Badwater, Upward, and Gorge map preferences, even after all the passion that went into designing them, and it's actually quite a tragedy. The contractor is just cool. Doesn't do a damn thing different, mind you. Just a fancier way of showing contracts and making so instead of having to give out contracts, you just work your way through them. I really like that. It's just cool. It's just fancy. I like it. It's cool. It's slowly bringing TF2 to the 21st century. And, gameplay-wise, not necessarily canonically. I really wish they kept the contracts implemented since they were first introduced. I have no idea why they keep making these resurgences every couple months. It encourages people to try new classes and weapons and rewards people for playing the game, and it teaches newer players the ropes. Well, at least better than the training mode. I don't understand why they aren't a more common thing. I really don't. They just seem to work well, and they seem to be easy enough to implement. I just don't understand why they aren't a more common thing. I mean, they seem to be easy enough to implement. You could tailor the rewards to drop weapons for newer players to use. The only problem I've come across is just now during the Pyro update when the contracts that require classes less equipped to deal with the current never-ending onslaught of Pyros are incredibly difficult. To be fair, this should be fixed once the hype dies down and people go back to regular TF2. We got 5 new weapons to play with, and while that might not sound like a lot, it has definitely rocked the boat for the meta, which will take some time to taper out again. That's good. It's always good to mix things up. The Dragon's Breath, Rage, Fury, whatever it's called, that name is just boring. It's a really fun weapon. It offers a hugely different playstyle than your traditional WM1 Pyro, which is something that you really need. And people seem to be complaining about it being overpowered. I asked them why, and I've always met with the same, it's too strong, you can almost two-shot my classes, it makes Pyro more difficult to fight. I'm not saying the weapon is perfect, but it's close enough to be pretty balanced, from what I've seen so far. People seem to be getting upset that I compete with my class when it comes to buffs. We really need to take a step back and look at some of the other weapons TF2 has that nobody has a problem with, even though they can do the exact same thing. And the only reason Pyro is hard to fight right now is because there's so many of them. I guarantee you it isn't going to be any harder in the future. Pyro is just as counterable as any other class, even now. The Thermal Thruster is without a doubt every Pyro main's wet dream. Up until now, the only way a Pyro can get around is by either flare jumping or using the power jack on himself like a 14-year-old left at home. Finally, he has a serious increase in mobility that lets him spar with a soldier on high ground. Plus, it's a jetpack. I mean, come on, who doesn't love jetpacks? They're the way of the future, y'all. I'm really looking forward to seeing this weapon more common because Pyro secondaries really haven't offered a lot of varied gameplay in the past. And having something that has the potential to completely change how they fight is super exciting. I'm super hyped for this. I would really love to see what the community manages to do with something like this. Because what Valve has in mind for one weapon is by no means what the community is going to use it for. I mean, you look at sentry jumping and tripping. I just want to see if the community has some sort of way to take advantage of this. I'm really looking forward to that. Speaking of Pyro secondaries, the gas capture is a good idea, but is horribly flawed. It's designed to be a lingering Girardi sort of thing that can keep people walking somewhere for fear of being fire. A sort of short-term area denial, and that's a great idea. But once you use it, you have to wait for it to recharge. Just bear with me, this might take a bit. Hang on, we're getting there. Apparently, you can speed up the recharge rate by doing damage, but it's official. The holidays are here. Pvz Gw
Aggressive! Let's do it!
Even so, it doesn't help much at all. And I get why it takes so long. Being able to spam this thing makes everyone a walking
Let's do it!
but you're giving up a secondary weapon.
Quotes.
Doing that pretty much limits the pyro's effective range to a Kmart walkie-talkie level. Not being able to replenish it from
The
the
doctor
resupply locker
is
is
here.
a smart idea, but it seems to me that this weapon should have more of a Sandman-style
What
functionality.
the heck?
With it being a
So it
melee
has
weapon,
a
you can
zap.
charge by doing damage, buff banner style, something like that. The slap attack is a fun weapon. Kind of
Minions.
the mackerel and the eviction notice. It doesn't have much practical use, but the way I see it, Pyro could use a nice meme weapon, plus bitch slapping people is super satisfying. The second banana seems to be an okay weapon, pretty much on par with the other lunches, and I suppose it's more up to personal preference, especially since now we pretty much have the spectrum of food. It would have been even better if after eating it you dropped a banana peel behind you that sends enemies slipping on it a little bit, kind of like they do in Manhattan. Team Fortress 2 got new skins in the form of war paint, which is, I guess, it's pretty nice to be able to pick and choose what weapon you want it for, though, because the best part of these is the skins themselves. I mean, they look fantastic, and, just having it limited to only one weapon at a time, it's just a waste, Ask anyone who has the entire plaid set. It benefits to be able to pick and choose the weapons that you want it on. I've never seen sexier skins before. They look great. They look fantastic. I mean, they're flashy. They've got personality to them. They're a little edgy sometimes, but they're awesome. The biggest problem here, though, is that while these skins look good, the strange versions of them are pretty rare and expensive, and yeah, I'm sure you did that on purpose, Valve, but I really wish there was a way to make them strange. I've been so spoiled by stat clocks in TF2, I almost refuse to use a weapon unless it's tracking my kills. I mean, maybe that's just me, but I really wish there were fabricators that we could find that would make stat clocks for weapons beyond civilian grade. Maybe make them like the kill streak fabricators or chemistry kits, where you need a certain amount of different ingredients, just some way that a skin will not always be in its non-strange form. I suppose that's just me being a picky little snot-nosed brat, but I kind of wish there was a way you could work your way up to something better instead of just constantly rolling the dice. I mean, I have a lot of robot parts that I guarantee you I'm almost never going to use. It'd be nice to have a new use for them. Weapon inspections are probably my favorite part about this update. It seems a little benign, I know, but it gets me a little too psyched to be able to inspect every weapon I have. I know, kind of a little thing to be so worked up about, but I seriously enjoy it. Some of my favorite animations included the Locos bar, the Gunslinger, the self-aware beauty mark where it looks like the sniper's taking a sip. It's really cool to be able to see an Australian from every angle, or any sort of gun that you have a skin for it in every angle. You just couldn't always do that, and I'm just glad it's here. And so we come to the rebalanced weapons. Now there's a lot to talk about with these, so I'll keep it brief and save the in-depth stuff for another time. But there were 3 weapons I felt didn't really need to be rebalanced. Those being the gloves running urgently, the eviction notice, and the cow mangler. Granted, the cow mangler did in fact get a buff, but the eviction notice especially was a pretty okay weapon, at least for me. Personally, I didn't have much of a problem with the way the GRUs worked, but I know a lot of other people did. And if smarter folks deem it worthy, then so be it. Pretty much everything else on the list desperately needs weapons I use on a regular basis. The Pretty Boy's pocket pistol, the eviction notice, the YER.
I died? I just gave that count.
Anyway, the big thing I will definitely focus on in the future is that I don't have much else to say other than the fact that most of the changes were justified. I mean, they kind of already spoiled it for us a few months back, so it might as well be old news. The tweaks they did to the pyro are great, especially since the flame particles are just absolutely gorgeous. I really love them. Granted, it doesn't make every map look like the fiery pits of hell, but I digress. The air blast changes seem to be a little bit on the strong side, so I would really think that needs some work. Pyro's kind of been in just a tragic state of disrepair, especially when it came to his weapons, because he's limited to such a certain thing, and every other class has had adaptations to help them overcome the things that, they lack in, and Pyro really doesn't have that. I'm glad that they gave the Pyro some attention. The update, as predicted, is not without its issues. Day 1, the servers decided to shoot themselves in the face, as everyone anticipated, and there have been a number of exploits found. The most popular one seems to be the infinite health heavy. Thanks, Delphi, you douche.
along with a couple of broken map spots, all of which seems to have been fixed. Unfortunately, some of the glaring matchmaking issues are still present, and competitive mode is, and most likely will always be, a wasteland. The most controversial part of this update was how long it took to be released, leading to the all-important question: was it worth the wait? In my opinion, yes, but with a big but. I do think the update was worth the wait, but do I think it could have been released? Absolutely. But the way I see it, TF2 had been starved for content for a very, very long time, and probably by the time summer of 2017 came around, still with nothing definitive, people just sort of stopped holding their breath, either because they gave up or anyone who still was suffocated. By the time the update that many thought would never come finally hit, it was phenomenal to come back, which was excellent to see again. Did this update give us 460 days worth of content? No, not even close. In fact, there were some other updates that had just as much added in half the time. But I was so goddamn thrilled to know that this game had not yet been abandoned, and that feeling alone made things so much better. If you spend enough time in the desert, a cheesy water park will look like the greatest thing ever.
I'm the invincible, undefeated champion, Mount Zion, my ancestors can't rely on. Sorry, David,
Maggots. Maggots. What the heck? What's the blessing? Hey, I'm playing support medic here.
Inferno update.
I'm playing support science.
As well as the jungle-themed aesthetic, and boy, we got all of that and then some.
If
Now,
I
it's still in the first week of Jungle Inferno now, so there's still a few unpatched bugs and such floating around, but as launch
what?
Jungle Inferno has been a pretty big success in my book, almost doubling the current amount of players to a little under 100,000 overnight, revamping the Pyro class in a way that actually makes him, dare I say, fun to play. Now, usually when I do one of these update videos, I mostly focus on the engineer changes, and I leave out a lot of my general thoughts on the update itself, but considering the Jungle Inferno is the Pyro class's time to shine, and the engineer only got 3 relatively minor changes, I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about my first impression thoughts on the 5 new maps, Pyro weapons, and changes, which I personally voted to happen first, and the new contract system. So let's start off with the class everyone in their ons are playing right now, the new and improved Pyro. The Pyro class pack portion of this update is the result of a voting period that we had back when Meteor Match was released, where we could vote on who would be getting a class pack first, the Heavy or the Pyro. I personally voted for Pyro, as well as made a video explaining the reasons why I think Pyro deserves to be changed for the Fetter, and the too long didn't watch version of those reasons is simply this: consistency. Before Jungle Inferno, Pyro's flame particles were like playing the lottery. Sometimes you'd get hit by flames that weren't there, sometimes you'd get engulfed in flames and take no damage, and for a first-person shooter where you expect your weapon to do what you're telling it to do, this can be pretty frustrating for both parties involved. Couple the randomness of the flamethrower with the fact that the Pyro's mobility and damage output paled in comparison with other close-range classes like the Scout and Heavy, and it was clear to me that Pyro needed the most attention when it came to balance.
I'm healing my teammates when they need it.
Pyro, and it turns out Pyro won. So here we are with the changes that the devs have deemed necessary to pilot at least 6 or more Pyros on each team in whatever server I play on, which is to be expected for the next month or so, but is no less annoying than playing against a team of any stat class for that matter. I'm going to confidently say that the TF team have slapped the nail on the head here. First of all, the new Pyro weapons. My quick take on all of these are as follows. The Dragon Fury is basically a burst damage flamethrower that requires a little bit more traditional aiming skill than the rest of Pyro's primary weapons, and rewards that skill pretty effectively. I think any weapon that requires you to practice with it to make it viable is a step in the right direction. However, fighting against more than one Pyro who is using this thing makes you feel pretty helpless because it only doubles the speed in which you get melted. So right now, the Dragon's Fury might feel pretty powerful due to the sheer number of them being used simultaneously, but in 1v1 situations, it does feel pretty balanced. I'll give this one a 4 out of 5. The Thermal Thruster is more or less a jetpack backpack for the Pyro that allows you to have way more vertical mobility and horizontal speed at the cost of having no secondary weapon to do
reliable damage with. You can land on people to damage them a bit, but overall, this is the perfect secondary option for pyros that want to flank and occasionally jump into the fight for a surprise sky attack. But my main gripe with the thermal thruster is that the hidden switch speed downside really makes air bomb attacks only work if you get an insane amount of height and then switch to your weapon at the peak of your arc, so you can actually use it by the time you land. And it just feels really clunky for that reason alone. Even the degreaser doesn't seem to help much. As a result, it feels like the intended use for this jetpack isn't to bomb people, which I think is what everyone expects it to be good for, since the man tread stat really suggests that. But instead, it's supposed to be used for getting around the map easier and making flanking pyros faster and have more options, which is pretty good. I rate this one a 3 out of 5. The gas passer is a throwable gas canister that douses people in gasoline when they walk over the spot that you threw it on for a few seconds. It's a pretty neat idea. It reminds me a lot of the Girardi, except the way that the gasoline works is when you're covered in the green stuff, any damage you take will set you on fire, even if you're a pyro. This effect is pretty underwhelming compared to the rest of the other throwable liquids like the Girardi or even the Mad Melt, but because it lingers on the ground after throwing it, it's obvious that the gas passer is intended to be more of a supportive tool for discouraging your enemies to pass through a specific area, like a choke point. You can also charge the meter up way faster by doing damage, which is an interesting concept that I'm not really sure how I feel about. The main issue I have with the gas passer is that it's only really useful on certain maps, and only has a very situational use for a generally underwhelming effect. And for some reason it doesn't count enemies as being wet when using it alongside the Neon Annihilator, which if fixed could by itself make it worth using, since it would become a combo to rival the long-dead Extinguisher Puff and Sting. So I'm gonna rate this thing a 2 out of 5, but if they fix it to be comboed with the Neon, I'd probably bump it up to a 3. The Hot Hand is a melee weapon that is basically just the pyro opting not to use as primitive tools, and instead just straight up slapping people around. Stat-wise, it's just a combination of the disciplinary action and the holy mackerel. It does less damage, but on a successful hit, allows you to run around faster for a few seconds. It's honestly the most underwhelming weapon that Pyro got from this update from a gameplay standpoint, and I see no reason to use this weapon over the other stable Pyro melees other than just wanting to dick around and slap people. In other words, this is probably going to be the most popular weapon of the 4. I give the Hot Hand a 1 out of 5. So those are all of the new weapons for the Pyro, but the Heavy, the second place winner, surprisingly got to walk away with a new weapon as well. And while the update page seemed to market it as an underwhelming joke weapon compared to the Pyro's new toys, I actually think that the second banana is a pretty great side grade to the Sandwich. It recharges twice as fast, which actually seems to translate to almost instantly, at the cost of only healing 200 health instead of the full 300, and dropping a small health pack instead of a medium.
Hello.
Now, on paper, this seems like a pretty obvious downgrade
Playing
to the
that's up.
Sandwich on all fronts.
That's
You get less health,
how ironic.
less health, but in practice, I found it to be even better than the Sandwich when you are playing without a dedicated healer. Because it charges so
irony.
fast, you will essentially
I'm
have
playing as an
access to
offensive
health packs at
sunflower.
all times, which is extremely
Gets the
useful for the roaming style heavy who works mostly on
most
boosting
health.
of
Gets the
packs.
heal
However,
master
because it heals less health
boast.
when you throw it, it's not
Playing as
ideal
an
for sharing
as
when
an
compared to the Sandwich. So
offensive.
basically, when you have a pocket, use the Sandwich, and when you don't have a pocket, use the banana. I rate this one a 5 out of 5. Second place doesn't seem so bad anymore. Overall, the new weapons are all pretty great, and I'm very excited to see how they affect the metagame over the next few months. But what I'm mainly stoked about when it comes to the Pyro Pack is the changes to the way the flamethrowers work in general. Simply put, they did everything I hoped they would. They made the flame particles that land on people actually do damage. They made the air blast make way more sense. The only thing I don't fully understand is why they nerfed Afterburn, especially since it wasn't really an issue to begin with, but I also like that I don't have to scramble for a health pack every time I'm set on fire. As a whole, playing Pyro just requires you to pay attention more. You have to put your flames on enemies in order to damage them instead of just putting your face on them. I never thought I'd see the day where aiming as Pyro actually pays off, but it really does now. I rate these changes a 5 out of 5, just excellent form on the TF teams.
Where you at? Forgot I don't have a few beamers. You son of a gun. I hate the goop. I hate it. I hate it.
But with every great idea
I
comes
hate
a
it.
terrible one. So let's talk about
It's so freaking much.
now. I actually think
I'm
that a lot of the community
invincible.
maps released with Jungle Inferno are top-notch and extremely fun to play. Lazarus is hands down my favorite from both a gameplay and artistic point of view. It's simultaneously the most fun and the best looking map map of the bunch. Moss Rock comes in with a close second because I hate this damn train. Why does it kill you when you touch it? But it's also one of the only maps where you can build on roofs and not have it be completely unfair to everyone, which makes it challenging and very fun. Enclosure's awesome Jurassic Park theme kind of makes up for the fact that it's obnoxiously long in both round length and sniper sightlines, and Brazil is just meh. The art style reminds me of a less interesting Borneo, and the maze-like buildings are pretty unfun to play in. Banana Bay looks very pretty, and the whole train destroying the cart thing is an interesting dynamic concept borrowed straight from Cactus Canyon, but I'm just not a fan of Payload Race at all, and overall it just feels like a labyrinthian high tower. But the real disappointment,
Eats me.
at least, is Mercenary Park. Mercenary Park is the thematic map that ties in with the fantastic animated short that fired off the first day of Jungle Inferno. Now, don't get me wrong, this map looks amazing.
Come on.
The detail is seriously staggering.
Let
I
us
don't think I've seen a more
move.
detailed map from the TFT.
You
The crocodile pit
son of a gun.
is full of funny signs. There are little tourist pods zooming around in the background. Exploring the map on your own is completely worth it.
I'm a wizard.
Brilliantly executed,
I'm
and I am not in
invincible.
charge of designing the aesthetics for this map. But when it comes to playing Mercenary Park, I'd liken it to banging your head against a wall for 30 minutes. The first area of the map is actually pretty great. A lot of low and high ground with open space to jump around, interesting props to use to your advantage when fighting people. But once you enter these doorways, you're now doomed to a tiny room after tiny room with choke points, low ceilings, and more choke points.
Mean Mark 863. Thank you, Igor. You are dead. Literally, just dies like, just falls on his knees and just then falls backwards. I shouldn't be laughing because that was my teammates. That just did. Come on, mate. Let us go.
Completely restrict the less viable classes from succeeding if they play it right. But Mercenary Park is 80% indoors, which means rocket jumping, sticky jumping, and the brand new jetpack are met with bumping your head on the ceiling. The viability of close-range classes and spamming explosives down corridors is way too high, while the usefulness of mobility mechanics is pretty much reduced to jumping to the second floor instead of taking the stairs. It's grindy, claustrophobic, and encourages the stalematey turtle tactics that make TF2 less fun. I'm pretty sure Mercenary Park will become a little bit more bearable after there aren't so many pyros running around in the tight hallways, but I can't really see myself playing on this map very much after I finish the contracts associated with it. And speaking of contracts, the new contractor system is visually much better, and the choose-your-own-adventure style lifted straight out of CSGO is a great improvement, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. The reward system gives you a lot of control over what kind of loot you get, which is now the war paints replacing all skins, but they're basically skins. It's just easier to get a skin of the weapon you actually want. You have a clear-cut end game that you're working towards, and it even makes the obtaining of the new weapons way more interesting than just simply crafting them. I personally hope that after the Jungle Inferno contract season is over, they would consider making all weapons available in the exact same way as the free Pyroland contracts, where you both test out the weapons and become familiar with how it works by doing specific challenges, and then at the end, you're rewarded with one to use forever. That's a cool idea. But one of the cooler features of the contractor that I'm finding extremely useful is that when you do contracts at the same time as the friends that you're partied up with, they can get points towards your progress and vice versa, which can allow you to do some pretty quick speed runs of the more grindy contracts if you lobby up with 5 or 6 people. But the only complaint that I have about the Jungle Inferno contracts is that there are a few pretty annoyingly difficult challenges that don't seem to be correctly leveled for the section that they're in. Now, I genuinely appreciate that they went a little harder this time and gave us challenges that take a lot longer to complete, but some of the ones in here, like extinguish teammate with the thermal thruster 30 times or defend the control point 30 times, are frustrating even for seasoned players just because of how little opportunity you have to actually aim to do these things. There are a few challenges in there that can be completed almost like an achievement, where all you have to do is just play a certain class for a long period of time and it will eventually happen without you really trying to go
overdrive. H2 overdrive.
Medic challenges, which are good to have on in the background when you don't feel like doing anything super specific, but also want to work towards completing a contract, and those are cool ideas that encourage diverse team compositions. However, I really wish that you could choose to play a different class in order to participate in the free Pyroland contract. I know that it goes against the theme of weapons and
trying them out before you were rewarded with one, but I'm already getting pretty sick of fighting against entire
Let us
teams
move.
of all pyros, all of them just trying to do extremely specific things with a new weapon. If you were instead given a random set of 3 classes to choose from that you had to play as in order to complete the pyro lane contracts, I think the composition of every pub team would have been pretty manageable from the start. But because you have to play as pyro in order to participate in one of the most easily accessible parts of Jungle Inferno, it's made for some really awful rounds where if you're not actively trying to complete a pyro lane contract, you pretty much have to play heavy or engineer in order to not get burned to a crisp around every corner. And of course, spies are nowhere to be found. They're probably all just cloaked in the corner of every map waiting for this whole thing to blow over, and I don't blame them. And one more thing to talk about before I get into the engineer stuff is the completely overhauled lobbying UI. Now, when it comes to casual mode, I never solo queue. I much prefer to lobby up with my friends. And before Jungle Inferno, the system was little more than just a slightly different looking MVM lobby screen that you were restricted to unless you used console commands to get out of it. Well, now the way you queue up to a match is streamlined to work from literally anywhere in the game. In a custom server, you can queue up for casual. Looking around your backpack, you can queue up for casual. Want to check on your contract progress while queued for casual? You sure can. This feature is obviously a long time coming. The ability to queue up for a match from anywhere is a modernized feature that works perfectly in TF2, and it makes joining your friends that much easier as well. Is your friend currently in a match and just request to join the party and you'll be queued up for the very service they're currently in, and you'll be added to his team, given there's enough space for you to pop in. It's a huge quality of life change, and I'm just so glad that I get to kiss goodbye to re-inviting my entire party once we decide to hop into a different server. Alright, finally on to the last thing that I'd like to talk about, and probably one of the big reasons you're even watching this video right now, because I've been known to discuss this kind of thing from time to time: engineer. The hell is Frontier Justice? Sounds like it's shooting a box of Captain Crunch. Overall, the patch notes and balance changes were kind of one of the more underwhelming parts of the Jungle Inferno update for me, but that's mainly because I've known about 90% of the weapon balances for months. The TF team tested the waters back in June, and while a few of the more polarizing proposals were edited in response to feedback, most of the patch notes look pretty familiar and have been discussed to death already by me and other speculative TF2 players. However, now that we're actually able to play around in-game with these changes, the reactions can be a lot more fine-tuned and educated based on first-hand experiences. And for the engineer, it seems he got off with a lot less than I expected, but generally a net gain as far as balance goes. The only weapons that got touched by the almighty hand of the Nerf god were the Rescue Ranger and the Panic Attack. But he also has received a pretty substantial buff to the way his buildings work.
Let us go. Let us dance.
Setup time. Let's start by talking about the setup time thing. So during the setup period of every round, if the map has one, the engineer will spend twice as much metal per swing when upgrading his buildings. This means that for around 60 seconds before the gates open, you can be much speedier about getting that gear upgraded, which pretty much fills all of the gaps for the perfect engineer rollout. The best way to get your buildings fully upgraded and to the front without assistance from your team was to use a technique dubbed the Jag effect rollout by yours truly, and while it often wasn't perfect for getting all of your buildings to level 3, you got pretty darn close, and generally you'd be able to finish off everything before your nest started receiving any oncoming fire. With this change to setup time metal application, the Jag effect rollout just became a lot simpler, and it allows a perfect ace of level 3 buildings before the gates open on pretty much any map. I plan on making a comprehensive guide to the new and improved Jag effect rollouts on every popular map where it is applicable, but until then, I think it's pretty self-explanatory based on just seeing it done on a few maps. Now, the Panic Attack rework I was personally disappointed in, mainly because it feels like they removed what made the gun interesting to begin with instead of improving upon the core concept, but it technically works better as a secondary. Now it does slightly more damage at close range, and it's really fast to switch to, but it also does less damage at a distance due to the huge spread. I also don't completely understand why it punishes you for firing your shots consecutively, but basically it's been buffed on every class except for the Engineer, because the Engie is the only one who uses it as a primary weapon, while every other class uses it as a secondary. However, as far as Engineer weapons go, it's not a huge loss in the Engie arsenal. Every other shotgun except for the Thompson was a better option than the Panic Attack before the rework, and it looks to remain that way. And now we arrive at the big one. The nerf that every NG main had an opinion about this summer, and now it's finally here, the Rescue Ranger. With the Jungle Inferno update, you now spend metal at a 4-to-1 health to metal ratio when you heal a building using the Rescue Ranger's bolt. This means one simple thing: you have to spend metal to heal and upgrade buildings no matter what. This is how it should have always been, and I'm surprised it took this long to get here, and here we are. So what does this mean for the viability of the Rescue Ranger? Is it dead? Well, no. Not much is going to change, I can tell you that for sure. Ever since the Rescue Ranger was added to TF2, it's been a staple in the defensive Engineer metagame. Even after they lowered the healing rate and nerfed the Pvz Gw save, it's always been an extremely powerful tool. Now, I don't think the Engineer would be very fun without the existence of the Rescue Ranger. It allows him to safely leave his building side for a bit to scavenge for metal or check the flanks. Without this weapon, the Engineer would be glued to his buildings and make hauling long distances even more of a pain in the neck. That being said, being able to easily rescue your buildings to safety at any distance for only 100 metal, as well as heal your buildings at any distance for free, with the only downside being that you take more damage while hauling and you have decreased self-defenses, is a little too powerful of a trade-off. But more importantly, I think that metal management is a pretty big part of playing Engineer effectively. Requiring the Engineer to keep track of how much metal he has, how much metal he needs to do what he wants, and how to spend the metal in the best way possible in the heat of the moment is a decent chunk of what raises the skill ceiling for the Engineer. So if you give him a powerful tool that increases the mobility of his buildings and allows him to become more independent of his buildings while also revolving his playstyle around them, and remove the need to manage metal due to just giving him a pool of metal that costs nothing but making sure you've got bolts in the chamber, and there's a little too much hand-holding going on here. So that's why I think this decision is good for the Engineer. It rounds out the metal application to be all-encompassing with no exceptions. If you need to heal your building, you have to have the metal to do it. And if anything, I think we got away with a real steal here, because the Rescue Ranger heals at a 4-to-1 ratio, while the Wrench still heals at a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning it's still cheaper to use your bolts than it is to use your Wrench. And you can do it from any distance. So yeah, nothing has changed about the power of the Rescue Ranger. It's still incredibly useful in almost any situation where you want to play around your buildings, and it will remain this way until something better comes along. In fact, the only thing that has really changed here is what is required of you, the Engineer player. Now, if you want to heal your building, you have to make sure that your metal count isn't at 0. And as far as the Engineer skill sets go, looking at a number every once in a while isn't that hard. You'll survive. They changed the bounding boxes for the ammo and metal distribution from dispensers to match the one for health, which basically means that getting both health and ammo from dispensers is more consistent. However, that trick where you can get ammo and metal through some walls is effectively patched, since the dispenser correctly does a line of sight check for all of its properties now. And, you can't use the Eureka effect to teleport out of hell anymore, so yeah. You're doomed to this existence forever, it seems. Now, before I end the video, I wanted to talk to you guys about one last thing, and that is my community. I've got a bunch of you guys always wondering what I'm up to, and possibly might want to chat with me and other Uncle Dane fans about my YouTube videos, Twitch streams, and other just general TF2 stuff, or you just know just stuff in general. Well, there is a place where you can do all of those things, the Uncle Dane Community Discord. Now, if you don't know what Discord is, it's a completely free voice and text application where you can join servers to chat with
everybody
all over the world inside of
back when back to the flight.
And click the invite link to the server you want to join, and that's it. So after you've made a Discord account and downloaded the app, you can join my Discord by clicking the link in the description. Once you're in there, you can read over the rules, pick your favorite TF2 class, and
gotcha.
Start chatting. Either in
Gotcha in my sights.
It's already a pretty
I am dead.
With over 5,000 members. And while I'm much more of a lurker than most people, I like to chat with fans about the latest videos or give my opinions on the current TF2 topics.
I need help.
Pretty much anything, so feel free to pop in and introduce yourself. I personally think it's one of the best TF2 focused community hubs.
Oh, I see you. I think I see you.
Of this video. Anyway, thanks
No,
so much for watching.
that's Gator.
You guys can certainly expect more videos from me now that there's a lot more new content.
I'm a
to have fun
ship.
with in TF2, so I will talk to you nieces and nephews.
I am a ship.
Bye-bye.
I have the head of a ship. My ship is my head. I see you. I'm shooting you. I'm shooting you. Here's Z7. Let us go. This is Captain Squawk, and he is legendarily awesome. He can insta-kill some. Surprise! Nope. I was gonna use my frickin'
Team Fortress 2 is some of the best, most iconic
dun 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 dun.
Share over here with Halo, you got good graphics, and over Munch, you got two women in skin-tight clothing fighting each other. Like, I haven't even seen that on the internet before, like 100 times. I'm pretty sure I have that website bookmarked, actually. Meanwhile, in Team Fortress 2 animated shorts, you got people pissing in jars, people with heads getting blown off. You're looking at gaping holes into people's bodies to see hell itself. You see birds. Over the last 50 years, the movies have starred the 9 playable classes in Team Fortress 2 and Elizabeth from Bioshock Infinite wearing glasses. The first film starts off with the main character, Pvz, basically sitting down and telling us that we're in for a bumpy ride, and also that if anyone touches his gun, that they will be fined $35, and they'll come over to your house and punch your lights out, if you know what I'm saying. This short reveals that Pvz
That's
is more
me.
than just a disproportionate Russian guy. He's actually just an intellectual who can do advanced trigonometry, as well as high-level mathematical calculations that he often uses to contemplate the human race's existence. But fuck that, he's just gonna shoot everyone with a big old machine gun. Next up, we meet Private Ryan, a loud guy with a suit that requires Michael J. Fox to follow him around on the battlefield while he was shooting people. What is historic